Hello, I am Shaggy, I am Philalutea, and I did not mean for my camera to start rolling, so hi, I guess. Welcome back. This is another episode of the Something to Do Parenthetical About Nothing Close Parenthetical podcast, and I'm ready. Whether you're ready or not, I don't know, because I know that really I do need to visit sophism. But sophism is decidedly its own thing, and even though it has a similar name, it's if I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a sophist either. And so I began this exploration, this discourse on love and the nature of what it means to be Philalutea, what it means to be a lover of anything, but specifically of the truth. And I'm ready. You're not, but I'm ready to return to Phaedrus, because having read the books that I've read most recently, specifically Thucydides, the Book of Job, Prometheus Bound, the Suppliant Maidens, and then most recently, the Book of Enoch, I am ready. The foundation isn't set. There's still a whole other philosophical in the modern use of the term, a whole other intellectual tradition and school that's happening in Athens that Socrates and philosophy themselves are actually in opposition to. And so there's this theory that John Keel has, that every movement has its equal and oppositional movement. And so he uses Uri Geller as an example, that Uri Geller had the Magnificent Randy. And so for every Uri Geller, there's a Magnificent Randy. And so for every sophist, there's a Socrates, effectively. That's actually not the way it works. So like for every person today who embodies the ideals and the approach of sophism, there isn't a philosopher accurately recreating the approach of Socrates to combat them in public. And the reason you can know that is true is because sophism continues to manifest itself in the modern world. If sophism hadn't resulted in Socrates' death, you understand Socrates would have probably defeated it. And so we're going to go back to the Phaedrus, and we're going to pick up at the conclusion of the second speech. So Socrates, if you remember, listens to Phaedrus tell a speech by a guy whose name I'm not going to be able to remember right now, and then Socrates gives a counter example of that speech, and I'm just going to pick up right at the end, after he's given the speech, and Phaedrus has immediately commented on it. Socrates responds with, "Enough! What is said in dispraise of the lover may be converted into praise of the non-lover. Does not your simplicity observe that I have got out of dithyrambics and into heroics, when only uttering a censure on the lover? And if I am to add the praises of the non-lover, what will become of me? Do you not perceive that I am already overtaken by the nymphs, to whom you have mischievously exposed me?" And so now, something that's important for you to understand and that you won't get in a middle school, high school, early university education about the Greek world is nymph. You know that word nymphomaniac? Okay. You know it has nymph in it? Okay. That's what the nymphs were. Alright. So that's outside 3 minutes, so it won't be in the trailer. But I mean, that is way too early to be talking about succubuses. "And if I'm to add the praises of the non-lover, what will become of me? Do you not perceive that I am already overtaken by the nymphs, to whom you have mischievously exposed me? And therefore I will only add that the non-lover has all the advantages in which the lover is accused of being deficient. And now I will say no more. There has been enough of both of them. Leave the tale to its fate. I will cross the river and make the best of my way home, lest a worse thing be inflicted upon me by you." And then Phaedrus says, "Not yet, Socrates, not until the heat of the day is past. Do you not see that the hour is almost noon? There is the midday sun, standing still, as people say, in the meridian. Let us rather stay and talk over what has been said, and then return in the cool." Your love of discourse, Phaedrus, is superhuman, simply marvelous, and I do not believe that there is any one of your contemporaries who has either made or in one way or another has compelled others to make an equal number of speeches. I would accept Simmias the Theban, but all the rest are far behind you, and now I do verily believe that you have been the cause of another. That is good news, but what do you mean? The divine sign forbids Socrates to depart. He is sensible that he has been guilty of impiety. I mean to say that as I was about to cross the stream, the usual sign was given to me. That sign which always forbids but never bids me to do anything which I am going to do, and I thought that I heard a voice saying in my ear that I had been guilty of impiety, and that I must not go away until I had made an atonement. Now, I am a diviner, though not a very good one, but I have enough religion for my own use, as you might say of a bad writer. I'm going to stop here. I kind of went off on this. We talked about this in the first part, but we're going to revisit it now that he's actually said it in context. What does it mean to be a diviner? A diviner is somebody who's able to speak for or with the divine, okay? And so in modern New Age, he might have said, no, I'm a bit of a channeler, okay? Or I'm a bit of a medium, okay? What he's saying is that he's sensitive in some way. And so he's saying, I'm not very good at it. Not very good, so I don't speak a lot of prophecy, but I'm sensitive. I'm sensitive to the divine. And then he says, I have enough religion for my own use. Socrates himself says, I have enough religion for my own use. And so that does not sound like a modern definition of the word religion. He's using religion not in an idiosyncratic way, but in an ancient way. He is using religion, and first of all, the word he's using is decidedly not religion. It's a Greek word. I don't know what word, but religion comes from Latin, which means from the Latin word religio, which means binding. And so basically, he's saying, I have bound myself to the divine enough to be sensitive to it, but that my religion is my own. And what that means is basically that his wife handles his religious stuff, which is contemporary city folk way to deal with religion. It's the way that Thucydides, if you remember, described the Athenians who don't actually live in the city of Athens. It's the way they handled their religion. And so if we remember, just like those Athenians who didn't live inside the city, Socrates, a person who very rarely, if ever, has left the city and participated in Marathon, I believe. He may have actually participated in the Peloponnese Wars at this point in history. Plato is describing him as in line with what the people outside of the city of Athens would understand when he's saying, I have enough religion for my own use. Like, you guys are very religious. People that live out here are very religious. I'm not as religious as, and we would say superstitious. I have enough superstition for my own use, is how we would say that today. But then he continues to say, but I have enough religion, I have enough superstition for my own use. And so you might think of a gambler who might say, I have enough religion, I stay on the right side of God, just enough to hit higher than 51% in my gambles. I have just enough religion for what I want out of life. And so, on some level, now that we're past the 7-minute mark, I am reading these. People ask me when I read in public, they go, why are you reading at all? Why are you reading that? And then they want to know, why are you homeless? Why do you choose to be homeless? Why don't you choose to do anything but be homeless? And it's well, I am doing something other than being homeless. I don't know what homeless person you know, and then I don't know what homeless person you have ever seen spend their time at intellectual pursuits. In fact, I've known a lot of people who have helped me and were formerly homeless and said, damn, I really wish I'd spent my time homeless brushing up and getting intellectual, because I need those skills now that I'm successful and I don't have them, and I wish I had taken the time to develop them. And so, I might say what Socrates just said there. Instead of religion, I might say I have enough success for my own use. And then as you might say of a bad writer, and then he goes into the example, and we're going to cut back into the example. The bad writer, his writing is good enough for him, and I am beginning to see that I was in error. Oh, my friend, how prophetic is the human soul. At the time I had a sort of misgiving, and, like Ibycus, I was troubled. I feared that I might be buying honor from men at the price of sinning against the gods. Now I recognize my error. And so, in today's parlance, what he just said is that he realizes that his behavior was what he thought was stolen valor. He realizes his error. And so, what did he realize was stolen valor? Phaedrus is going to ask the question. What error? That was a dreadful speech which you brought with you. That was a dreadful speech which you brought with you, and you made me utter one as bad. How so? It was foolish, I say, to a certain extent impious. Can anything be more dreadful? Nothing, if the speech was really such as you describe. Well, and is not Eros the son of Aphrodite and a god? So men say. And then Socrates says, but that was not acknowledged by Lysias in his speech. Now see, I'm trying not to get too loud, but when I start talking the way Socrates is talking, I start to get mad. I start to get impassioned. I start stamping my feet and throwing my hands around. I start to get upset. And so he sounds to me like he's pissed off. Because, for example, yesterday I watched Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers just chat it up for 53 minutes is all I could stomach of the 3 hours that they were talking about. And it's like, at some point, it just threw me into a fit of rage, inarticulate rage. And I sounded like this. Because one of the things I kept saying is, well, they won't acknowledge this or they won't acknowledge that. They won't acknowledge existing information because they're too fucking stupid to have absorbed it. And it pisses me off because both of them are millionaires. They have too much success for both of them. God, I wish Aaron Rodgers would just retire and get laughed out of entertainment. And just chased into a fucking hole in Malibu. Yeah, let him move to fucking Texas. They don't want you there, Aaron. That's why Socrates didn't leave the city of Athens, if the city of Athens didn't want Socrates. But I am too far ahead of myself, because I need to leave from Phaedrus, and I need to read the books that led to Socrates' demise. And so Socrates, I imagine he's pissed off. He's agitated now. He's passionate. And you'll understand why I imagine that. But that was not acknowledged by Lysias in his speech, nor by you in that other speech with you by a charm drew from my lips. For if love be, Eros, as he surely is, a divinity, he cannot be evil. Yet this was the error of both the speeches. There was also a simplicity about them which was refreshing, having no truth or honesty in them. Nevertheless, they pretended to be something, hoping to succeed in deceiving the mannequins of earth and gain celebrity among them. Mannequins means many kin, the many people. The peoples of peoples. All of the many forms of human peoples. Wherefore I must have a purgation. Purgation means he's going to vomit, which means I am going to speak prophecy now, because this is how the Greek prophecy said it too. I'm going to vomit this forth. Cope. And I bethink me of an ancient purgation of mythological error, which was devised not by Homer, for he had never had the wit to discover why he was blind, but by Stesichorus, who was a philosopher and knew the reason why. And therefore, let me explain. This is what I was trying to explain to you with Thucydides. There's a difference in being Homer or Hesiod, who claim to improvise what they're saying. They're improvising it on the spot for an audience. They didn't go and investigate. What they know is the poetic tradition. Stesichorus, Hesiod, Thucydides, people in the contemporary world of Socrates' youth and Plato's old age, that span of time in intellectual tradition, knew better because they were going around the world. They were going around the Mediterranean and just west of Asian world, and they were asking questions. And Socrates hits you right here with my claim. Homer never had the wit to discover why he was blind. Do you understand what that means? It means that Homer wasn't clever enough to understand why he didn't know what the fuck he was talking about in the Iliad and the Odyssey. He wasn't clever enough. He didn't talk to enough people, and he just lacked the wit and the intelligence to be able to reconstruct an accurate four-dimensional model of the Mediterranean in the late Bronze Age collapse. But what Plato is telling you that Socrates is saying is that Socrates has the wit to have figured it out. Socrates figured out what modern people know, or something akin to what modern historians and archaeologists know about the ancient world. And if Plato is saying that Socrates knew, Plato is saying that Plato has also figured it out. And so all these people that want to reach to Plato and say, oh, well, Plato is telling us about all these things like Atlantis and this and that and this and the other thing. Plato is phrasing it in such a way that a stupid person will come to the conclusions that people like Aaron Rodgers and Joe Rogan and Joe Rogan's guests like Graham Hancock and I can never remember his name, but the geology guy, Randolph. Idiots. All of you. Idiots. And please, if you think the way they do, and you just heard me say that, and you think I'm calling you an idiot, you are welcome to just go to any other video. You really are. Because I'm trying to teach you how not to be like them, because you do have a choice. And if you don't think you have a choice, please don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. I just do not need any more of people like you in my comments for the rest of my life. But by Stesichorus, who was a philosopher and knew the reason why, and therefore, when he lost his eyes, for that was the penalty which was inflicted upon him by reviling the lovely Helen, he at once purged himself. What was the punishment? What was the punishment that God gave Paul? I'm sorry, Saul. Anyway, purged himself means, in this case, recanted what he said. And the purgation was a recantation, which began thus. False is that word of mine, the truth is that thou didst not embark in ships, nor ever go to the walls of Troy. And so what he's saying is that there was a tradition that's happening at the time in Athens called the Palinode. It had been going on for a while, but where sophists would get out in public and make claims about people that were unsubstantiated by facts. They would also have to give public apologies, public palinodes recanting what they had said. A cantation is a chanting of a poem or the singing of a song. When you cant, you're speaking in code. That's why thieves can't. Thieves code. You understand? When you recant, he didn't say recant in Greek. When you recant in Latin, re cantare, actually means to back speak. The re there means again speak, but it means take back. It means I want to speak again. I would like to correct myself. That's what a recantation is. It's a poem. It's a work of art in public, taking back the thing that you said. So if you were to slander somebody today and the how do you say this? The damages that the person that you slandered required you to repay were a palinode, you would have to record a single, not a diss track, but an apology track. You would have to record a song apologizing for slandering them. I actually think that is a significantly more publicly damaging, damning, and humiliating way to deal with somebody slandering you or doing anything illegal than a fine and a public, yeah, I'm going to therapy, that they don't mean. I'm going to release a statement is so much less damaging to the inside of the person. It's so much less humbling than making them record a song and play it in public and maybe even go on a tour. Maybe you have to go on a world tour, Harry Styles style, singing this fucking song apologizing for slandering somebody. So don't fucking slander me, by the way. Because the damages that I might request of a judge might be capricious and fucking weird. Because what I don't give a fuck about is your money. But I might take a great deal of joy in humiliating you on the world stage. So maybe watch what the fuck you say about people. Socrates continues to say, the two speeches were a blasphemy against the god of love. That is, Eros. Socrates I hope that this is Socrates speaking and not the, I'm sorry. Sometimes the fucking, translator of my copy cuts in with, okay. Sometimes he cuts in with, translator's notes without telling me he's doing that, but that is not what is happening here. For whatever reason, Socrates actually refers to himself in the third person, so I'm going to start over. The two speeches were a blasphemy against the god of love. Socrates, therefore, before any evil happens to him, will make a recantation. So what he's saying is, hey, if you're listening, anybody who sends messages to or knows Eros or Eros, you, if you're around, because this is a shrine to Eros, it's a nymph shrine for sure, and the nymphs are aspects of him. He's saying, I didn't mean those things. He wanted me to say them, so I would like to recant what I said by speaking well now of Eros. And when he had completed his poem, which is called the Recantation, immediately his sight returned to him, that is, Stesichorus. And what happened? What happened to Saul when he recanted about Jesus and Jesus' followers? Now I will be wiser. So do you believe it? That's the question I'm asking. Do you believe that really happened to Paul? Do you really believe it happened to Stesichorus? Now I will be wiser than either Stesichorus or Homer, and that I am going to make my recantation for reviling love before I suffer. Or do we think that this is a metaphor? In the same way that fire, the radiant fire, is not actual fire in Prometheus Bound. It's a metaphor for divine insight. Do we think that the blindness that they suffered was real? Or do we think that it was a metaphor for self-blindness, for having no self-awareness? And then recanting what they said was that moment of humiliation, that dark night of the soul, after which they gained sight, a second sight, inward sight, self-awareness. Tell me in the comments. Now I, says Socrates, will be wiser than either Stesichorus or Homer, and that I am going to make my recantation for reviling love before I suffer. And this I will attempt not as before, veiled and ashamed, but with forehead bold and bare. Phaedrus then says, nothing could be more agreeable to me than to hear you say so. And Socrates says, the love which they described was of a very mean and ignoble sort. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. I genuinely don't know why that happens to me, and I'm not trying to hide it because Philolitea, like if I've got something that gives me chronic hiccups and some doctor someday watches this and goes, hey, you're dying, I'd like to know before my chronic hiccups kill me. They're in every video. Socrates says, "The love which they described was of a very mean and ignoble sort. Only think, my good Phaedrus, what an utter want of delicacy was shown in the two discourses. I mean, in my own and in that which you recited out of the book. Would not anyone who was himself of a noble and gentle nature, and who loved or ever had loved a nature like his own, that is, gentle and noble, when we tell of the petty causes of lovers' jealousies, and of their exceeding animosities, and of the injuries which they do to their beloved, have imagined that our ideas of love were taken from some haunt of sailors to which good manners were unknown, he would certainly never have admitted the justice of our censure. I dare say not, Socrates. Therefore, because I blush at the thought of this person, and also because I am afraid of love himself, I desire to wash the brine out of my ears with water from the spring. And I would counsel Lysias not to delay, but to write another discourse, which shall prove that ceteris paribus." Absolutely what he did not say is a Latin phrase. I do not know why translators do this dumb shit. Translate it all to English, or translate none of it to English. I don't know what ceteris paribus means, so let's find out. It's a Latin phrase meaning other things equal. So why the fuck did he not just translate that? Okay. I would counsel Lysias not to delay, but to write another discourse, which shall prove that all things being equal, the lover ought to be accepted rather than the non-lover. And Phaedrus says, "Be assured that he shall. You shall speak the praises of the lover, and Lysias shall be compelled by me to write another discourse on the same theme." Which is further evidence that I am insisting to you that the reason that Lysias wrote that initial discourse is because it's a personal letter to Phaedrus, because they are lovers. And Socrates says, "You will be true to your nature in that, and therefore I believe you." And Phaedrus says, "Speak and fear not. But where is the fair youth whom I was addressing before? And who ought to listen now, lest, if he hear me not, he should accept a non-lover before he knows what he is doing?" And Phaedrus asked, "He is close at hand," or answers, "And he is close at hand, and always at your service." The second discourse of Socrates. The purport of this is to show that love is a madness of the noble sort. Okay, so there are different kinds of madness, which means there are different kinds of insanity, which means that if I'm insane, if I'm mentally unwell, there are different kinds of mental wellness. This madness is of four kinds. 1. Prophecy is madness, as is proved by considerations of philology. Philology is the study of various languages, I believe. Let's find out. For some reason, this has a Latin dictionary, but not a Greek dictionary, so. And because of the way I'm recording this, it doesn't always want to show me the dictionary. Come on, why are you scrolling? So I have a follower, Mr. S. It's good to see you, buddy. And we've been talking about anger and about feelings of overwhelming anger that come over you that you don't have any control of. And what is fucking going on? Where has that word gone? Move the page on me. I don't know why it won't just let me. It's opening the dictionary. Instead of opening the dictionary up in the... I have this two windows. So I have my camera down here in the bottom half from my perspective. The bottom half of my screen is my camera, and the top half of my screen is the Kindle. And so when I highlight this word to get it shows the dictionary and the entire entry in the bottom of the screen, and so I don't know why it won't come up to the top of the screen so I can actually see it. When I click on it, or I try to move it at all, it disappears. And it didn't do that with the Latin word. It popped up in the proper part of the screen. I don't understand why this is happening. It's happening no matter how big I size my Kindle, so it would be happening if my Kindle were normal. Oh, it's telling me that I have to download. It's not working because it's telling me I have to download the dictionary. So I don't know what philology means. I think it's the study of language. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of these. They're very frustrating for me too. And so what I was talking about is like when you want to talk about like anger. Right now, I am seething with rage that I am being distracted by this and that my equipment isn't just working with me. But you wouldn't know it. And that's the point. The point is less about not feeling the anger. It's about not letting it dictate how you choose to act. Choose to act. This madness is of four kinds. Prophecy is madness, as is proved by considerations of philology. Know then, fair youth, that the former discourse was the word of Phaedrus, the son of vain man, capitalized, who dwells in the city of Myrinaceus. And this, which I am about to utter, is the recantation of Stesichorus, the son of godly man, Euphemus, whose name is, ironically enough, spelled just like euphemism. So, Euphemus probably did euphemisms. Who comes from the town of Desire, and you understand that this is, he's explaining that this is hypothetical. And is to the following effect. I told a lie when I said that the beloved ought to accept the non-lover when he might have the lover, because the one is sane and the other mad. This is still in the quotations, but you have to understand that he's saying, this person is saying this to this person, and they're both fictional people, and you understand that this is hypothetical, so that not only does Phaedrus, the person he's talking to, not get confused. Like I said, like if you think I'm accusing you of being as dumb as these two specific people, you need to go away. Because I'm talking about these two specific people and what they were talking about and how that makes them dumb, not how it makes you dumb. You understand what I'm saying? And so in that same way, if he's going to talk about this conversation, he has to use two characters, and he chooses to name one of them Phaedrus that isn't the Phaedrus that he's talking to, and he gives him a euphemistic name, and then he talks about a guy whose name has become synonymous in our day with names that mean something else, maybe something, a polite way of saying something impolite, and then he gives him a polite name, a polite way of saying something impolite, and calls him godly man. You see what I'm saying? Actually, Euphemus might just mean godly man, now that I'm looking at my copy. Again, it's in parentheticals. I didn't read it as parentheticals. So he's saying that Stesichorus is the son of Euphemus, and that's a euphemism. That godly man is a euphemism here. And this Stesichorus, this recantation of euphemism comes from the town of Desire, which is obviously, it's hypothetical. So Phaedrus doesn't get in his feelings and think that Socrates is coming directly about him. I'm not talking about you. You asked me to do a hypothetical about this dialogue. I'm doing that. If you don't like it, if it makes you think things about you, that's self-awareness. And if you lack it, keep walking, Phaedrus. Just keep walking without me. You see why I'm saying these things as I read this? It's because I deeply love you. I want the best for you. And if that isn't how you are, and it most certainly isn't the way that Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers are, then I'm going to tell you. Because how do you get what you want from people, for people, without telling them? This is what I want for you, and this is what I want from you in order to get what I want for you. This Strizicor, or rather this Phaedrus is speaking to this Strizicurus, godly man, and this godly man explains, I told a lie when I said that the beloved ought to accept the non-lover when he might have the lover, because the one is sane and the other mad. It might be so if madness were simply an evil, but there is also a madness which is a divine gift, and the sort of the cheapest blessings granted to men. Can we think about this? Something you need to do. Anytime anybody makes a claim in a video, you should probably pause it and ask, do I know whether that's true? Before you continue with what they say about it. He just said that it might be the case that you should be engaged sexually with somebody who doesn't love you. If the madness that incarnates itself through love and the act of being in love were simply an evil, like a lion is an evil to a flock of rabbits. It's not what they're called. But there's also a madness which is a divine gift. And the source of the chiefest blessings granted to men. When you're in love, say those of you who are married or who are engaged to be married, for example, is there any greater gift in your life than your beloved? Because you have to ask yourself, like, did you earn it? Like, did you buy her or him? Or are they a gift? Were they something freely given to you by your life? I know the answer in my life. For prophecy is a madness, and the prophetess at Delphi and the priestesses at Dodona, when out of their senses, have conferred great benefits on Hellas. Hellas is the Greek diaspora, both in public and private life. But when in their senses, few or none. And I might also tell you how the Sibyl and other inspired persons have given to many and one many, and to many and one many an intimation of the future which has saved them from falling. But it would be tedious to speak of what everyone knows. That's funny. He's saying, you know, these famously stoned people, they've given huge benefit to the world. While stoned. Zero while sober. They're useless to us all while sober. But while they're high, hugely useful. And wait a minute, on that note, I'm going to get stoned. It's like, you know, on some level, there was a time in religion's history when all of those tithes and taxes and all of those sacrifices went to pay for the drugs that the priests were feeding the oracles, right? So my positioning myself as somebody between you and the divine that can speak to it for you, because I am very stoned almost all the time, and I use it to maintain my sensitivity, and I use your tips to maintain my sensitivity. Socrates is saying that conversation isn't even fucking worth having. It's not even fucking worth having, he says, because everybody knows that shit. How upside down the 21st century is. I wonder why. Why do you really think the 21st century is so upside down about psychoactive chemicals that aren't alcohol or pharmaceutical drugs? I don't know the answer. I do. But do you? Second form of insanity. The inspiration which purges away ancient wrath. Now he goes directly into 3, because that one isn't worth expounding on either. Do you understand what the inspiration that purges away ancient wrath means? It means the kinds of songs and dance and drug ceremonies they used to do in order to keep gods like Poseidon and Zeus and Hephaestus from killing them in things like hurricanes and earthquakes and forest fires and ravaging enemy armies and volcanoes. And you know, volcanoes, in this day and age, the volcano that Mytilene, when Mytilene blew up circa 1180 BCE, that's a lot more relevant in time in 600 BCE than it is in 2025 AD. It's much more recent memory. Like imagine if you've ever heard of what happened at Mount St. Helens. I think that was in the 80s or the 90s. It was a big deal. Big fucking deal. When I was a kid, people talked about that shit all the fucking time in the 90s when I was a little kid. Imagine that, but there was an entire city sitting in the exact spot where that fucking mountain blew up. That's what happened at Mytilene in Crete. What do you do to stop that? You get everybody fucking loaded and you dance. Because what else is there to do? You do something about the nothing. Because there's nothing you can do about that. Nothing Odysseus could have done to stop Poseidon from deciding that he was going to just give him one really fucking bad day while he was in that raft. Nothing you can do about it. Poseidon even said, "Oh, Odysseus has already done the appropriate things to how do they put it here? Purge my wrath. I'm just going to be a dick." Gods get to do that. 3. Insanity 3. Poetry is madness. There will be more reason in appealing to the ancient inventors of names, who would never have connected prophecy, which foretells the future and is the noblest of arts. I'm sorry, I'm not using Plato's mouth. I'm using my mouth. Voice. Let's try that again. With madness, or called them both by the same name, if they had deemed madness to be a disgrace or dishonor, they must have thought that there was an inspired madness, which was a noble thing. For the two words I think that might say Martiki and Mariki. No. That can't be right. I can't read Greek. If I could read Greek, translator, this stuff makes me mad. If I could read Greek, I wouldn't be reading the translation in English. He's got 2 Greek words here. This Greek word and that Greek word, and I don't know the letters, but the difference between them is that one has the Greek T looking letter. It's like a lowercase letter, but it looks like a capital T with a tail. And so they're the same letter except for that. And so I think that the U with the little dong hanging off the front is an M. And so I think the V is an R. And so I think that says whatever that T is, it's not a T. I think it's like a K or like a D. And so it's like Mardiki and Mariki, something like that. Or that I really don't know. I'm sorry. And so what Socrates continues to say is that these 2 words are really the same, and the letter, the T, is only a modern and tasteless insertion. And this is confirmed by the name which was given to them by the rational investigation of futurity, whether made by the help of birds or of other signs. This is so funny because he's talking about the way etymology works and the way, I guess, philology and linguistics work. But something that when I want to test whether I know what the fuck I'm talking about and whether my hypotheses hold water, I talk to Gemini AI a lot. And one of the things that I suggest is that we just, because we don't have linear A, we don't know how the words that were spelled in linear B in ways that we can recognize as being Greeks, we don't know how they were spelled. And unless we're going to sit down and we're going to find the way every word was spelled forever, or we're just going to assume that because the Middle Ages didn't have spelling standards, that the Greeks didn't have spelling standards. that we just don't know how words evolve. And so, like, one of the examples that I use is that Dionysus used to be spelled effectively Diognosos, and the Greek linguists, like specialists, want to go nope, gnosis and Dionysus and gnosis, Dionysus. Though that can't be his name. His name cannot be Gnosis of God, because their reasons. I don't know what their reasons are. But Dionysus was the god of frenzy and wine. He was the god of ecstasy through drinking wine. He was the god of psychoactive brews being dissolved in alcohol, which is possible. You may or may not have heard of laudanum. It's a readily active way to get opium from the lozenge form into the bloodstream orally, quickly, through wine. You dissolve you just drop the lozenge in the wine, let it dissolve, drink it down, boom, you're fucking stoned now. And we know that the Dionysiads, recent archaeology is showing that the Dionysia, they did something very similar. They had a ritual very similar to the Christian Eucharist, and that wine was absolutely spiked with LSA compounds. And LSA is it's a less intense psychedelic than LSD. It's a similar compound. And so anyway, the point is that even in Plato's day, words were changing in the same way that they change, like in our time, right? Like we change words, and we'll do slang spellings, and Socrates, being an old man shouting at clouds to a young man, is like, you kids add that T looking letter, and it doesn't need to have that T letter. If you fucking idiots could read linear A, you'd know that it used to look like this. Look, we could even do Socrates more like, and this is confirmed by the name which was given by them to the rational investigation of futurity, whether made by the help of birds or of other signs. You understand, he's a grumpy old man, and he's going, we have all kinds of ways of arriving at knowledge. Damn sophists, damn relativism, damn young kids with you can argue anything. Yeah, you can argue anything, but is it arguable? Of course it is. You see what he's saying? The name that was given to the rational investigation of futurity, which actually means the history of the future. Like if he were to actually leave the Greek the way it was there, literally what he just said is the rational history of the future, which means he's saying that there are really good ways to predict the future that don't just rely on the old means of birds. History means investigation. You can just rationally investigate the future, and you can. You really can. Ask me to do it sometime. Ask me to make predictions. I predict things all the time in my old videos and some of these newer ones. Okay. This, for as much as it is an art which supplies from the reasoning faculty, mind, nous, and information. I think that's Istopia, is how that word is pronounced. To human thought. I think that's oinois. That can't be right. They originally termed... Why did he do this? Olanoistiki. I don't think that's right. But the word has been lately altered and made sonorous by the modern introduction of the letter omega. Olanoistiki and Olunistiki. I don't think that's right, but I'm trying my best. And in proportion as prophecy, okay, there we go. Martiki is more perfect and august than augury, both in name and fact, in the same proportion, as the ancients testify, is madness superior to a sane mind. And I know I cannot read that word. For the one is only of human, but the other of divine origin. Again,
Where plagues and mightiest woes have bred in certain families owing to some ancient blood guiltiness, there madness has entered with holy prayers and rites, and by inspired utterances found a way of deliverance for those who are in need. And he who has part in his gift, God, I'm sorry, and is truly possessed and duly out of his mind, is by the use of purifications and mysteries made whole and exempt from evil, future as well as present, and as a release from the calamity which was afflicting him. The third kind is the madness of those who are possessed by the Muses, which, taking hold of a delicate and virgin soul, and their inspiring frenzy, awakens lyrical and all other numbers, with these adorning the myriad actions of ancient heroes for the instruction of posterity. But he who, having no touch of the Muses' madness in his soul, comes to the door and thinks that he will get into the temple by the help of art, he, I say, and his poetry are not admitted. The sane man disappears and is nowhere when he enters into rivalry with the madmen. 4. Insanity the fourth. Love is madness. I have done insane things for women I loved. Put myself through insane, psychic, torturous landscapes, hellscapes for decades of my life for women that I loved. Insanity 5. That's not where we go next. 4. Love is madness. I might tell of many other noble deeds which have sprung from inspired madness, and therefore let no one frighten or flutter us by saying that the temperate friend is to be chosen rather than the inspired. But let him further show that love is not sent by the gods for any good to lover or beloved. If he can do so, we will allow him to carry off the palm, and we, on our part, will prove in answer to him that the madness of love is the greatest of heaven's blessings, and the proof shall be one which the wise will receive and the witling disbelieve. Effectively, what he's saying is that all you really need to say is that, madness, the love of madness, is the greatest of heaven's blessings, and anybody who disagrees is fucking stupid. They just don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But first of all, let us view the affections and actions of the soul, divine and human, and try to ascertain the truth about them. The beginning of our proof is as follows. Soul is self-moving, and therefore immortal and unbegotten. Okay. This portion of the book is why I'm reading this on some level. Some level I'm reading it to talk to you about drugs because Derrida is going to talk about Plato's pharmacy when we finally get around to reading Derrida for this damn thing. But the reason I'm reading this all the way for the first time in my life, I've only ever read this in dreams, is because I've only ever read this in dreams. But I have read it and I came to its conclusions 25 years before I read it in a dream. So just imagine me, 13, skinny, long, dyed blonde hair, meditating in a room just covered in anime pictures because it was better than the wallpaper that was there, and it was something to meditate on and think about besides the grinding abuse of my school environment with my teachers and my classmates and my parents. Figuring this out for myself without the help of Plato. This is the first time I'm reading this. But I know it by heart. Because I figured it out at 13.
And I haven't made a decision in my life that wasn't virtuous. And so I have nothing about which to be guilty. For which to be guilty. So you tell me. Whether as the rain pours down and traps me in here to make sure that this video is going to be longer than an hour, whether I don't provide value to the human species, to YouTube, as a platform, just by being me. Vincent Dennis, who is Shaggy, a Shaggy Dog storyteller, and Diz Phil Alitea. And I'm reading this in my voice. I'm no longer doing the silly voice for Socrates. Soul is self-moving, and therefore immortal and unbegotten. The soul through all her being is immortal, for that which is ever in motion is immortal. But that which moves another and is moved by another, in ceasing to move, ceases also to live. Only the self-moving, never leaving self, never ceases to move, and is the foundation, and is the fountain and beginning of motion to all that moves besides. Check your Newtonian physics. Is Socrates wrong? Now, the beginning is unbegotten, for that which is begotten has a beginning. Do you understand? Begotten means made, right? Formed of something else by something else. Begotten, born. In order for something to be begotten, it has to have a beginning. So the beginning has no beginning. It's not made up of lesser components. It is not begotten. But the beginning is begotten of nothing. For if it were begotten of something, then the begotten would not come from a beginning. But if unbegotten, it must also be indestructible. For if beginning were destroyed, there could be no beginning out of anything, nor anything out of a beginning. And all things must have a beginning. And so this, I say, double check your Big Bang science. What does the Big Bang say? The Big Bang says that the beginning, there was actually a beginning before the beginning, and that beginning has no beginning or end. It's called the Planck epoch. Seconds, like something like 0.035 nanoseconds or something like that, before the Big Bang. There was no singularity. There is no math that allows for a singularity. There was no singularity. There was no moment before the beginning. There was just the beginning. And therefore the self-moving is the beginning of motion. Again, check your Big Bang. What moved first? The universe or the singularity? Well, the universe did. Why do we know that? Because the universe is still expanding and still moving. And so what Socrates is saying is what other people have began to hypothesize, that life, the necessary components of life that eventually coalesced into amino acids that became the primordial soup as we describe it on Earth, that the primordial soup was probably moments after the Planck epoch was over. I can't prove that, but that's what I believe. I believe that because that's what all of the scripture says. That's what all of the psychedelic people, all the people who've experienced psychedelic or out-of-body mystical experiences, they all describe the same thing. They all describe the Planck epoch in the same words that modern physicists do. And you're telling me that these translators who don't even know
which words need to be not in Greek for the ease of reading of a person who doesn't speak any Greek, that they know astrophysics? Give me a break. Aaron Rodgers doesn't even know anything about how to spin a football. But you're going to tell me that a translator knows astrophysics. Get out of my face. And this can neither be destroyed nor begotten, else the whole heavens and all creation would collapse and stand still. I'm starting that over. And therefore the self-moving is the beginning of motion, and this can neither be destroyed nor begotten, else the whole heavens and all creation would collapse and stand still, and never again have motion or birth. But if the self-moving is proved to be immortal, he who affirms that self-motion is the very idea and essence of the soul will not be put to confusion. Okay, so what he's saying is that the universe itself is where soul originates. The self-moved is the universe, spinning on no axis, crazy as that is to imagine. And it can be neither destroyed nor begotten. In your lifetime, the universe will not spring into birth again, and it will not collapse. It will not. Else the whole heavens and all creation would collapse and stand still. If at any moment the universe were to stop spinning, like the core centrifugal nature of the universe, whatever gravity it is that's actually making the universe, whatever force it is, whatever self-moving apparatus it is that is actually keeping everything in the universe spinning in a clockwise fashion. It's not all in a clockwise fashion, but it is remarkably all spinning in the same direction. A lot of it is remarkably spinning on a level plane and in the same direction. It's crazy to think. But if that thing, even for a second, stopped, the butterfly effect, the rippling effect would be that the universe would be thrown into utter disarray and ultimately collapse. And he's right. This is what astrophysics teach us. And never again have motion or birth. The unique situation that allowed it to happen the first time, if it were to stop in the middle of the process, it couldn't pick it back up and it would never happen again. And again, Plato through Socrates is just right. That's just what the astrophysics and the quantum physics, that's just what our mechanical understanding of the universe, it's just what it tells us. So if my soul and your soul and his soul and its soul and their souls and all soul all have in common that we're all the universe's soul, we're all images, we're all, I can't use that language yet, but we are all in some way the same thing as that thing, then that means that we're indistinguishable from the universe itself. None of this, we are made of stardust, we are stardust. No. We are the universe at a different level of abstraction, at a different layer of zoom. We are. I'll get this out without a stoner cough. We are. We are. Damn it. Why won't it happen? We are the universe. We are. That's so funny. Stoner cough notwithstanding, it doesn't make me wrong. It makes me right. We are the universe. Plato is saying it. Socrates is saying it. Phaedrus is listening without breaking in, so Phaedrus understands. But if the self-moving is proved to be immortal, he who affirms that self-motion is the very idea and essence of the soul will not be put to confusion. For the body which is moved from without is soulless. A rock can't move on its own. He's talking
He hasn't developed this language of will that will show up in the Middle Ages. But I've read a lot of Middle Ages. I've read a lot of Middle Ages philosophy and literature grappling with Plato and trying to explain what Plato is saying to their students, frankly, in exactly the same way I'm doing. I have read a lot of commentaries on Plato, and I have listened to a lot of modern academics explain Plato. So I may be reading it for the first time, but I know this material very well, uncomfortably well. And so what he's saying here is that a body is an object. This is where object and objectivism language comes from in the Middle Ages. But the body that is moved from without, that means from outside itself, like this. This is a body, and I'm moving it, and it has nothing to do, it's moving, has nothing to do with any internal process that this thing is undergoing. You understand? The body which is moved from without is soulless. The soul is the will. This thing has no will. It cannot make decisions. It cannot choose to do things. So like if something goes wrong and it like the other day I opened my backpack and the heater element had turned on one of these things and it had burned from 99 to 1% battery with the heater element on inside my backpack. It did not will to do that. The environmental factors pressed the on button long enough that it turned on. Those environmental factors did not will to turn this on. You understand? These are they will later be called causeless cause. Or no, they'll be called caused effects. But that's not Plato's language yet. That's medieval language. The causeless cause is the Planck epoch at the beginning of the Big Bang, at the beginning of the universe. And the causeless cause is the motion that set all motion into beginning. You see what I'm saying? This is simple stuff. It's not easy to understand necessarily, but it's simple. I believe you can understand this. You actually can have a grade school, pre-middle school understanding of mathematics and make it through this and arrive by the end of what he's teaching here at the end of this book with an advanced understanding of quantum and Newtonian physics. So just stick with me. This is not how I learned it. I obviously didn't learn it by reading Plato. I learned it by exploring the same cognitive spaces that allowed Plato to come to the conclusions, and then as a much later adult, I revisited the knowledge that I had through great courses, lectures, etc., and conversation with Gemini. Many of you who may or may not see this, my 250 or whatever followers it is right now, came here because one day my mind was blown by the Big Bang, by the Planck epoch. Understanding what the Planck epoch was shaped everything for me, and it allows me to articulate what Plato is talking about, because obviously Plato doesn't have Max Planck to talk about. Okay, so the body that's moved from without is soulless, but that which is moved from within has a soul. And so if you can will to move, you have a will. For such is the nature of the soul. The nature of the soul is to do the willing. But if this be true, must not the soul be the self-moving, and therefore of necessity unbegotten and immortal? So is not will, if you have a will, is not the will, of which your will is only an idea, it's only a fragment, it's only a representation, it's only an individual from out of a mass. For example, if you were to take an infinite number of marbles with an infinite number of variations and put them in an infinitely tall column, that's a force field that allowed you to at any point reach in and pull out only one. and you were to pull out only one, and you were to say, this is a marble, you would not say, this is the marble that I have. But that is the more specific way to say it. And so what Plato is saying, you do not have a soul. You are the soul that you have. Do you understand the difference? But if this be true, must not the soul be self-moving, and therefore of necessity unbegotten and immortal? The thing that makes you you was not born with you. You see? It pre-existed you. Enough of the soul's immortality. And frankly, enough of me trying to explain it to you. I've already done 10 hours on it. It's called Book 1. The playlist is called Book 1. I talked about consciousness without using the word consciousness, and I talked about the word intellect without using the word intellect, because both of those are jargon words from philosophy. Both of them belong in no normal person's mouth. You just don't know what you're saying when you use those words, and you really want to stop. Plato continues in Socrates' mouth, speaking to Phaedrus. The soul described under the image of 2 winged horses and a charioteer. Of the nature of the soul, though her true form be ever a theme of large and more than mortal discourse, let me speak briefly, and in a figure. And let the figure be composite, a pair of winged horses and a charioteer. Composite means of multiple parts. And so what he's saying here is, on the nature of the soul, through her, he's using a feminine divine appellation. True form be ever a theme of large and more than mortal discourse. And so what he's saying is that the nature of the soul is ineffable. We can't actually talk about it. We can't have a conversation about it. You can't ask me what I know. I can't tell you what you know. You can't give your opinion and then me ask you what you think you know. That is not how the soul works. And that is why it cannot be studied scientifically. Okay. And let the figure be composite. That means let it be multi-part. A pair of winged horses and a charioteer. There's your multi-part soul. 3 things. 2 horses, 1 charioteer. 2 things that are similar but different, 1 thing that's entirely different. One of these things is not like the others, and 2 of these things are not like one another. Do you understand that riddle? It's a really good way to problem solve. It's a really good way to problem solve. It's how Darwin figured out evolution. Okay. Now, the winged horses and the charioteers of the gods are all of them noble. And of noble descent. But those of other races are mixed. The human charioteer drives his in a pair, and one of them is noble and of noble breed, and the other is ignoble and of ignoble breed. And the driving of them, of necessity, gives a great deal of trouble to him. Do you understand the difference in a noble and an ignoble person? A noble person is somebody who was raised with parents, who had parents, who could remember their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, and who felt expectations. These are people now, the first in our chain, people who feel pressure to behave according to how their long dead ancestors would expect. That's what nobility is. All right? That's what nobility is. Ignobility is not automatically not having a family. It's just not that. So like when we talk about Commodus, Emperor Commodus was an ignoble emperor. He may have been born of noble stock, but he did not carry himself like a noble. His father, by the way, was Marcus Aurelius. Dive into that if you really want to see how much you're disappointing your parents. Driving them, the charioteer driving these opposite pairs of similar things, driving the yin-yang, for example, of necessity gives a great deal of trouble to the driver. Socrates says, I will endeavor to explain to you in what way the mortal differs from the immortal creature. The soul, in her totality, has the care of inanimate being everywhere, and traverses the whole heaven in diverse forms, appearing. What that means is what I've been telling you about the panpsychic universe and what Thucydides believed and what Enoch believed, and that everybody who's not a fucking idiot, and I'm sorry, but everybody who's not a fucking idiot understands that the universe is conscious, the universe is alive, the universe is God, and that God interacts with us in ways that we can understand on individual levels. So that can mean an infinite variety, from symbols to direct intervention to bodily apparitions. And what he's saying is all of those things are the same thing. The panpsychic universe. Again, remember, I share these opinions because I arrived at them independently at 13. So God, the soul, traverses the whole universe everywhere, and it appears in diverse forms. Everything that can move on its own will has a soul and is an aspect of the great soul. Moving on. When perfect and fully winged, she, the soul, soars upward and orders the whole world. And you remember those winged chariots that show up in Io's company with Thucydides, right? Whereas the imperfect soul, losing her wings and drooping in her flight, at last settles on the solid ground. And now you understand why rich people born circa 1970 are so obsessed with flying cars, because there's an inherent how do I want to put this? Implication. There's an inherent implication of the ubiquity of flying vehicles, and that's that the pilots, the people driving them, aren't fucking retarded. When perfect and fully winged, she soars upward in her winged vehicle, her flying car, and orders the whole world. Because if we could fly anywhere we wanted to go without constantly crashing into one another, the world is already perfectly ordered. Every house is already perfect. Because nobody is a willful idiot. Whereas the imperfect soul, losing her wings and drooping in her flight, at last settles on the solid ground. So like every car crash, when I see them, I'm not looky-looing like, man, look at the damage, look at the physics, I need to learn from that so that I am warned not to do that. No, I'm looking at it, and what I'm seeing is, well, there's two fucking morons. Two people that would be better off dead because they're going to do something else stupid that's going to result in somebody else's death. So you don't learn from that dumb shit. My dad was in like 6 or 8 car wrecks. You don't learn from that dumb shit. You don't learn from that dumb shit. I'm not talking about you, Mr. S. But everybody who's not paying from me, everybody who's not paying me, when I make critical shit and I jab that finger, I know they're pointing back at me, and I also know that I don't drive because I'm not mentally retarded. I will endeavor, says Socrates, to explain to you in what way the mortal differs from the immortal creature. The soul in her totality is the care of inanimate being everywhere, and traverses the whole heaven in diverse forms appearing. When perfect and fully winged, she soars upward, and orders the whole world. Whereas the imperfect soul, losing her wings and drooping in her flight, at last settles on the solid ground. There, Finding a home, she receives an earthly frame which appears to be self-moved, but is really moved by her power. And so what that means is that the imperfect soul comes down to earth, finds the home in a body that can will, something that has a brain, maybe not even a brain. Insects probably have souls because they can will to do things. But really, rabbits and ticks and other things, they're just moved by the will of the great soul of the universe. And isn't that a much better explanation of the cognition that's happening in the animals that I observe than instinct and pre-programming from the DNA? Because that's not what that bunny is doing when he approaches me to watch me. That's not pre-programmed behavior. That doesn't make any sense. And this composition of soul and body is called a living and mortal creature. Not a human, just a mortal creature. For immortal, no such union can be reasonably believed to be, although fancy, not having seen nor surely known the nature of God, I don't know what that sentence means, so I'm starting over. For immortal, no such union can be reasonably believed to be, although fancy means like imagine. Like, fancy doesn't mean, he's not saying, although fancy, like decked up and like a pretty boy. He's saying, although, imagine this. Not having seen nor surely known the nature of God, many imagine an immortal creature having both a body and also a soul, which are united throughout all time. Let that, however, be as God wills, and be spoken of acceptably to him. And now let us ask the reason why the soul loses her wings. The wing is the element of earth which soars upward. The great festival of the gods, which is celebrated in the outer heavens, mortals feebly follow. The revolution of the worlds in which the soul beholds all truth. The wing is the corporeal element which is most akin to the divine, and which by nature tends to soar aloft and carry that which gravitates downwards into the upper region, which is the habitation of the gods. The divine is beauty, wisdom, goodness, and the like, and by these the wing of the soul is nourished and grows apace. But when fed upon evil and foulness and the opposite of good, wastes and falls away. Zeus, the mighty Lord, holding the reins of a winged chariot, leads the way in heaven, ordering all and taking care of all. And how much does this remind you of the Book of Enoch? Written 700 years later or something. And there follows him the array of gods and demigods, marshaled in 11 bands. Hestia alone abides at home in the house of heaven, and I believe that Hestia is desire, or similar thereto. When the translator had that earlier moment where I was like, oh, I wish he hadn't done that. Sorry, my hips are starting to really cramp, and I can't go sit outside on my stool. I think that Hestia means desire. I'm not sure. We can find out. Let's see if it's going to freak out when I do this. It is. Of the rest, they who are reckoned among the princely 12 march in their appointed order. They see many blessed sights in their inner heaven, and there are many ways to and fro, along which the blessed gods are passing, every one doing his own work. He may follow who will and can, for jealousy has no place in the celestial choir. For jealousy has no place in the celestial choir. And so, like, I'm not trying to call. Every time I read Greek literature, I'm not trying to call the Jews culture thieves. I'm really just not trying to call them culture vultures, and I'm most certainly not trying to call the Torah and the post prophetic canon. I'm really just not trying to call it ripping off Indo-European literature traditions because they didn't think they were, but oh my god, it predates it in time, and it's the same content. It's just better written. It's just frankly better written. And so, like, I would say that Ezekiel and Enoch, on some level, like, I even read the Count de Saint Germain. I read his mystical vision. I've read a bunch of people's mystical books. And they're all building on this. They're all competing with it, which means they've all read it, and they're all aware of it, and they all know what's being expected of them. And that's not good. That's not good for people. That's not good for people who want to make seriously untenable claims. Because we have this. And we know that certain Jewish communities, like the Gnostic Christian community, were reading Plato because the Nag Hammadi had a copy, a redacted copy, but a copy of Republic, which I've also read for you for, a little bit. Okay. Jealousy is the last line that we just read. But here we go. But when they go to banquet and festival, then they move up the steeple to the top of the vault of heaven, or the climb, right? The chariots of the gods in even poise, obeying the rein, glide rapidly, but the others labor. For the vicious steed goes heavily, weighing down the charioteer to the earth, when his steed has not been thoroughly trained. And you have to understand that vicious doesn't mean like frothing at the mouth, I'm a crazy person. It means vice eos, okay? It means somebody whose life is ruled by vice. You could say visus, the visus person. But that's just not how we say it. We say vicious, for whatever reason. And then, like we'll say about a dog, that it's vicious, and vice is totally lost in that. But the vice there is for blood. It's for violence. I don't know the 7 deadly sins or whatever, or the vices, but you get my point. The way we use words, and like Socrates argued earlier, the way we use words today strips them of all meaning, and has for decades. So it's not your fault, Gen Alpha, but it's not my fault either. And the way I contend with it is by using words correctly. Say what words mean, and if I use a word to mean something that it doesn't mean today, I explain, well, I'm using what it used to mean. For the vicious steed goes heavily weighing down the charioteer to the earth, when his steed has not been thoroughly trained. And this is the hour of agony and extremest conflict for the soul. For the immortals, when they are at the end of their course, go forth and stand upon the outside of heaven, and the revolution of the spheres carries them round, and they behold the things beyond. But of the heaven which is above the heavens, what earthly poet ever did or will sing worthily? So what he's saying is, sure, we know a lot about the atmosphere. We see the atmosphere. And we know a lot about the stars. And so we know a little bit about outer space. But what do we know about the space beyond outer space? What poet has ever written about that in a way that is worthy? And the answer is nobody ever will or can, because there's nothing to write. There's nothing out there. There's no way to get out there. It is such as I will describe, says Socrates, for I must dare to speak the truth, when truth is my theme. There abides the very being with which true knowledge is concerned, the colorless, formless, intangible essence, visible only to mind, the pilot of the soul. Understand then that mind and soul, nous and psyche, are different things. Different things. And so when you go to a psychologist, you are not there to treat your mind. That would be a nousologist. A nousiatrist. You are there to treat your soul, your psyche. When you seek therapy with a psychologist, you're seeking religion. Go to somebody who's going to give you religion. Give them $300 an hour.
There abides the very being with which true knowledge is concerned, the colorless, formless, intangible essence, visible only to mind, the pilot of the soul, the divine intelligence being nurtured upon mind and pure knowledge, and the intelligence of every soul which is capable of receiving the food proper to it, rejoices at beholding reality, and once more gazing upon truth, is replenished and made glad, until the revolution of the worlds brings her round again to the same place. And so what he's saying effectively is that there's a reason that certain of you who clicked into this and have clicked away, or certain of you who have watched this long have friends who would have absolutely no interest in this, is that there are some people whose souls need a different kind of food than other people's souls, because they've advanced to a different stage of the lifetime of their soul, and old food no longer nourishes them. The food that they used to subsist on no longer nourishes them. It's like being a baby. I, as an adult man, cannot nourish myself on breast milk alone. Jesus said a man can't live on bread alone. If you're this far, you probably need your soul nourished with good food. That's why Enoch, when he's like, wow, that tree smells so beautiful, it smells so perfect and lovely, I want to go near it, Michael goes, yeah, that's the tree that will feed all of the righteous souls at the end of time. I'm going to read that again because I want to focus on the ending more than on the food this second time. The divine intelligence, being nurtured upon mind and pure knowledge, and the intelligence of every soul which is capable of receiving the food proper to it, rejoices at beholding reality, and once more gazing upon truth, is replenished and made glad, until the revolution of the worlds brings her round again to the same place. And so on some level he's talking about how the soul is also trapped up in the precession of the equinoxes, is also trapped up in the cyclical or circular rotation of the universe, the galaxy itself. And then it's time to come back and incarnate again, to be alive in a body and to behave as that body's will. In the revolution, she beholds justice and temperance and knowledge absolute, not in the form of generation or of relation, which men call existence, but knowledge absolute in existence absolute, and beholding the other true existences in like manner, and feasting upon them, she passes down into the interior of the heavens and returns home. And there the charioteer, putting up his horses at the stall, gives them ambrosia to eat and nectar to drink. The trouble of other souls in the upper world. They drop to earth and pass into many natures of men. Such is the life of the gods, but of other souls, that which follows God best and is likest to him, lifts the head of the charioteer into the outer world, and is carried round in the revolution, troubled indeed by the steeds, and with difficulty beholding true being, while another only rises and falls and sees, and again fails to see by reason of the unruliness of the steeds. And so on some level he's saying that civilization is it's a cycle of people trying. And that's what religion is, and that's what priests are, and that's what shamans are, and that's what the individual life is people trying to get back as close as they can, that life, that righteousness, that good, that knowledge. It's an asymptotic approach to God. You can never cross that barrier to 1 or 0, whichever you like. The rest of the souls are also longing after the upper world, and they all follow. But not being strong enough, they are carried round below the surface, plunging, treading on one another, each striving to be first. Sorry, the rain makes my body want to take a nap. And there is confusion and perspiration in the extremity of effort, and many of them are lamed, that is, have their legs broken, or have their wings broken, through the ill driving of the charioteers, and all of them, after a fruitless toil, not having unattained to the mysteries of true being, go away and feed upon opinion. The reason why the souls exhibit this exceeding eagerness to behold the plain of truth is that pasturage is found there, which is suited to the highest part of the soul, and the wing on which the soul soars is nourished with this. And there is a law of destiny, that the soul which attains any vision of truth in company with a God is preserved from harm until the next period, and if attaining always, is always unharmed. But when she is unable to follow and fails to behold the truth, and through some ill hap sinks beneath the double load of forgetfulness and vice, and her wings fall from her, and she drops to the ground, then the law ordains that this soul shall at her first birth pass, not into any other animal, but only into man. And the soul which has seen most of truth shall come to the birth as a philosopher, or artist, or some musical and loving nature. I love that because I was talking yesterday with Jim and I about how I get really upset when I listen to people talk about animals. Like, maybe I could read it for you for the channel, but like I was reading an article about this particular Cooper's hawk, and actually it's important to this, like this particular Cooper's hawk, all Cooper hawks in particular, among hawks as a class, right, is relative to our conversation about this transition from things. And man, I just got so upset. I was like, man, it's like people think animals are just dumb. It's like they think that animals are a lower level of being than human beings, when we evolved out of the same thing as they, and they are significantly more specialized to their evolutionary niche than humans are. And Plato's making the same argument here. He's saying that when a soul falls all the way into evil, it doesn't become a demon, it becomes a human being. And then when an evil human being's soul reaches as close as it can toward being divine again, it becomes a philosopher or an artist, and I am both. And somebody with a musical and loving nature, and I have both of those things too. So I am 4 times the highest reaching soul that humans can have. Continuing on. That which has seen truth in the 2nd degree shall become some righteous king or warrior chief. The soul which is of the 3rd class shall be a politician or economist or trader. These are descending in righteousness. The 4th shall be a lover of gymnastic toils or a physician. The 5th shall lead the life of a prophet or hierophant. To the 6th, the character of a poet or some other imitative artist will be assigned, a poet or an actor, effectively. To the 7th, the life of an artisan or husbandman. To the 8th, that of a sophist or a demagogue. And this is why I told you that I really need to read to you about sophists before we read this. But you can't know why Socrates held sophists to be at the lowest or among the lowest levels of human soul. Actually the lowest level of human soul, alongside demagogues and tyrants. Oh, I'm sorry, the 8th is demagogue and sophist. The 9th is tyrants. And like in a sort of Dante's hell, he's just put sophist right above the worst kinds of people, tyrants. And the question is, why? And the answer is, later. The common soul can only grow wings in 10,000 years. The philosopher or philosopher-lover acquires them in 3,000. The judgment. The souls of those who have never seen general notions will never pass into men.
10,000 years must elapse before the soul of each one can return to the place from whence she came. For she cannot grow her wings unless. And so if your reincarnation system allows for fewer than 10,000 years, it might be bullshit. Only the soul of a philosopher, guileless and true, or the soul of a lover who is not devoid of philosophy, may acquire wings in the third of the recurring periods of 1,000 years. He is distinguished from the ordinary good man who gains wings in 3,000 years, and they who choose this life 3 times in succession have wings given to them, and go away at the end of 3,000 years. And so now, if you remember, when I was reading Ghosts in the Middle Ages, these people being concerned about when their perdition ended, Socrates is pretty explicit and articulate about when your perdition ended. So if God changed his mind for Christians because of Jesus, that would be news to Socrates, and that would explain why Socrates and Plato are in hell in Dante. But the others receive judgment, and also what Socrates is saying effectively is that if I am, as I say, I'm a musical, philosophical soul, if that's true, that means I'm the highest soul. That means that it's still 1,000 years between me and my previous life. Minimum, if in my previous life I was a philosopher. If I wasn't, it was minimum 3,000 years. Maximum 10,000 years. That's possible in human time. Your reincarnation system, where you can be both Alexander and Cleopatra and Brutus and Jesus, isn't. Because all of those people are almost all contiguous in time. Like a lot of them were alive at the same time. When you see people do this with their reincarnation, usually the people they reach to were alive at the same time. How was your soul in 2 people at the same time? If you have an individual soul that's differentiated from soul. Doesn't make sense. It can't be possible. New Age and neo-paganism are bullshit. But the others receive judgment when they have completed their first life, and after the judgment they go. Some of them to the houses of correction, which are under the earth and are punished. Others to place in heaven, whither they are lightly borne by justice, and where they live in a manner worthy of the life, which they led here when in the form of men. And at the end of the first 1,000 years, the good souls and also the evil souls both come to draw lots and choose their second life. And they may take any which they please. The soul of a man may pass into the life of a beast, or from the beast return again into the man. But the soul which has never seen the truth will not pass into the human form. For a man must have intelligence of universals, and be able to proceed from the many particulars of sense to one conception of reason. What he's saying is that effectively, a wolf's soul can't inhabit a human body. A woman's soul can't inhabit a man's body, because you chose to incarnate in exactly the suffering you're manifesting. You aren't that thing you're claiming about yourself. You're just a stupid person. For a man, a human being must have intelligence of universals. And if you're stupid enough to believe that you were born the wrong gender, you're not even human. That's what he's saying. I may not agree with him, but that's what he's saying. And be able to proceed from the many particulars of sense to one conception of reality. This is the recollection of those things which our soul once saw while following God. Before you were born, he was saying, you knew the difference between male and female, and you've confused yourself for your reasons in life. Had nothing to do with your soul, you idiot. That's what Socrates is saying. When regardless of that, which we now call being she, when regardless of that which we now call being she, she raised her head up towards the true being. That's hard to say. This is the recollection of those things which our soul once saw while following God, when regardless of that which we now call being, she raised her head up towards the true being. And regardless there means literally not looking at. She was regardless. She hadn't seen yet. When, having not yet seen that which we now call being, she raised her heads up and looked at and saw true being, is how a Christian writer would phrase that. And therefore, the mind of the philosopher alone has wings, and this is just. For he is always, according to the measure of his abilities, clinging in recollection to those things in which God abides, and in beholding which he is what he is. That is, what God is, what God is. Before Moses is ever written down, could have been written down in Hebrew, but before it's possible, Plato was already identifying God God as that which is what is. Plato was already talking about ontological truth before Jews were writing about a character named Plato, before Moses rather, long before Jewish folklore knew who the fuck Moses or Abraham was. Plato wrote the core of the Moses myth. I am not accusing the Hebrew canon of being culture vultures, because that would deeply undermine a lot of people's right to live in the minds of a lot of people with guns. So what I'm not doing is telling the people with guns that those people don't deserve to live and that their books don't deserve to exist. What I'm saying is that if history, and that means the literate history, the writing itself, if books are flags, and flags mark territory explored, the territory that we are discussing right now is God by the name, or the euphemism, that which is what is. Plato named it first. The Jews don't get to call that a sacred name that nobody gets to use. Yahweh is what Plato is already calling his super god, his highest god, the god that Socrates personally worshipped in monotheism. That which is that it is. Ontological being as the highest God. That's Moses' God. He is what he is, and he who employs aright these memories is ever being initiated into perfect mysteries, and alone becomes truly perfect. So like the Jews trying to make a claim that only through Yahweh can you be perfect is kind of fucked up. It's kind of fucked up. But as he forgets earthly interest and is wrapped in the divine, the vulgar deem him mad and rebuke him. They do not see that he is inspired. The true light is the recollection of the past. And so here, here he is making an argument that the Jewish prophets, even Jesus, were the righter people in their communities. They were the right ones. Thus far I have been speaking of the fourth and last kind of madness, which is imputed to him who, when he sees the beauty of earth, is transported with the recollection of the true beauty. He would like to fly away, but he cannot. He is like a bird fluttering and looking upward and careless of the world below. And he is therefore thought to be mad. And I have shown this of all inspirations to be the noblest and highest, and the offspring of the highest, to him who has or shares in it, and that he who loves the beautiful is called a lover because he partakes of it. And so you understand what he's saying here, that being able to fly in abstraction, to be able to look at any topic in abstraction from infinite distance, to see it in the infinite distance as small and irrelevant, that is the perfect way to approach problem solving. But people will think you're mad because you're incorporating too much context. But that is the true love of knowledge. Being able to accurately recreate, for example, the first century around Jesus on the entire planet is a love not just of Jesus, but of Jesus' context, his century, his year, his life. That is loving Jesus. That is believing in Jesus. That is the mystery that Jesus hides throughout his quotations in the Gospels. He is called a lover because he partakes of the mystery. For, as has already been said, every soul of man has, in the way of nature, beheld true being. This was the condition of her passing into the form of man. But all souls do not easily recall the things of the other world. They may have seen them for a short time only, or they may have been unfortunate in their earthly lot, and, having had their hearts turned to unrighteousness through some corrupting influence, they may have lost the memory of the holy things which once they saw. Few only retain an adequate remembrance of them, and they, when they behold here any image of that other world, are rapt in amazement. But they are ignorant of what this rapture means, because they do not clearly perceive. For there is no light of justice or temperance, or any of the higher ideas which are precious to souls in the earthly copies of them. And I want to just talk real quickly about the Christian rapture. The Christian rapture means a staring. To be held rapt means to stare, and to rapture means to stare. Idiots, it doesn't mean that your body is going to disappear. It means that you're going to have been hollowed out by the light into a staring, rapt ecstasy. Idiots. Read the words. Just read the words. But they are ignorant of what rapture means, says Socrates, because they do not clearly perceive. For there is no light of justice or temperance or any of the higher ideas which are precious to souls in the earthly copies of them. They are seen through a glass dimly. Paul himself quotes that line, I think, in Corinthians. And there are few who, going to the images, behold in them the realities, and these only with difficulty. There was a time when, with the rest of the happy band, they saw beauty shining in brightness, we philosophers following in the train of Zeus, others in company with other gods, and then we beheld the beatific vision and were initiated into a mystery which may be truly called most blessed, celebrated by us in our state of innocence, because we had had any experience, before we had had any experience of evils to come, when we were admitted to the sight of apparitions innocent and simple and calm and happy, which we beheld shining in pure light, pure ourselves and not yet enshrined in that living tomb which we carry about, now that we are imprisoned in the body like an oyster in his shell. He's describing the Eleusinian mysteries, where you used to go, or the Dionysian mysteries, for example, where you used to go into dark places, like at the Eleusis cult. Used to go into a particular cave under Eleusis, near Athens, and the Dionysians, as we've already described, they used to go out into the woods, and they used to take intense psychoactive drugs, often psychedelics. And then they used to play a little candle Just a little tiny light in the cave. And then they used to trip balls to the cavorting shadows. I'm not joking. That's what he's describing here. And what he's saying is that, yeah, rich people like Aaron Rodgers and Joe Rogan, sure, they go on their trippy tourism trips. They go and, they chug ayahuasca. They butt chug ayahuasca. But you know what they don't do? They don't see the light that their soul saw before they embodied. They do that foolish, naive shit because they want to remember what they saw. Because they want to remember what they saw the first time, before they incarnated. You don't get to see what you saw before you incarnated in life. Because seeing that is death. It is death. And inducing a near-death experience on purpose is the single most risky thing you can possibly do. Aaron Rodgers with your fucking stupid darkness retreat trying to induce a near-death experience. Go fuck yourself. You're not a psychonaut. You're a rich asshole. We find beauty. That's not what he says next. Next, what he says is, let me linger over the memory of scenes which have passed away. We find beauty here on earth, but of wisdom there is no visible image. The recollection of the true beauty fades quickly, but is renewed with a sort of ecstasy at the sight of the higher beauties of earth. And again, he wouldn't have said this, but fruito Dei, he's saying the fruit of God, but of beauty, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, is what being born is. How does nobody know that Adam and Eve and the garden are before birth? The curses after the garden are puberty, you assholes. How can you teach children sexual reproduction in school? How can you teach children to mutilate their genitals in public school? But you can't teach them that Adam and Eve is this state of not being born yet. Assholes. We find beauty here on earth, but wisdom, there is no visible image. The recollection of the true beauty quickly fades, but is renewed with a sort of ecstasy at the sight of the higher beauties of earth. Fruito Dei. But of beauty, I repeat again that we saw her there shining in company with the celestial forms. And coming to earth, we find her here too, shining in clearness through the clearest aperture of sense. For sight is the most piercing of our bodily senses, though not by that is wisdom seen. Her loveliness would have been transporting if there had been a visible image of her, and the other ideas, if they had visible counterparts, would be equally lovely. If you could see God, if you could see the supernatural reality with your naked eyes, it would be too beautiful for you to comprehend and continue living. These people that tell you NDE stories, and then they're like, oh, but I've got to live the rest of my life to deserve to get back into this place, are missing something. If that place were that good, they'd just send themselves back there on purpose immediately upon leaving. So there's a reason to be skeptical. Because what Socrates is saying is that if those people had really experienced what they say they have experienced, they wouldn't still be alive. It's too beautiful. The soul yearns. The soul yearns to return home. Like Odysseus yearns to return home and relinquish his patronage. The body desperately needs the soul to not do that. So if the eyes of the body were able to see the realm of the soul, even the body would see this imprisonment for the cruelty that it is. It is cruel that a being like me has been stuck in this body since my first attempt at suicide at 6 years old. 32 years is a cruelty to trap in soul-crushing institutions like public school, public university, and minimum wage service jobs. I will not go back to any of them. Not for any wage. Not even for the guarantee that signing that contract would separate my soul from my body in a satisfying manner. Because there is not enough weed, there is not enough drugs that I haven't tried in the universe to accomplish that sans death. You know the only person who's not disappointed by an overdose? By dying from an overdose? The overdose. The infinite relief. Oh, thank fuck, it's finally happening. I haven't experienced dying. But every time my life comes to a point where it's like, oh, this could be fatal, that's my first thought. Oh, thank fuck. So when Plato, through Socrates, says her loveliness, the soul's loveliness, would have been transporting, he means between life and death. Nor he who is not newly initiated or who has become corrupted does not easily rise out of this world to the sight of true beauty in the other. What he's saying is you can meditate as hard as you want, you can take all the drugs you want, but if you're a shit-ass person, she's going to avoid you. She doesn't want to know you. He looks only at her earthly namesake, and instead of being awed at the sight of her, he is given over to pleasure, and like a brutish beast, he rushes on to enjoy and beget. Exactly like Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers mentally masturbating together for 3 hours, comparing the size of their mental erections over and over and over again. Aaron even began the conversation with a joke that Joe Rogan made him stop in the middle of about homosexuals comparing the size of their erections, because that's what they were going to be doing for the entire conversation. Joe Rogan was at least that self-aware, but that's where self-awareness ended in that conversation. Holy shit. Aaron Rodgers is maybe the most self-blind person I've ever experienced. The persona that he allows Pat McAfee to see is actually an act of disgusting condescension. He lets himself believe that the persona of a deeply stupid person that Pat acts like is who Pat really is. I don't like that guy. I'd like him to be out of football now. He's not good enough to still be in football and to think and behave this way. He was never good enough to behave this way. Now, if he had won a Walter Payton Man of the Year award that I'm unaware of, I'll redact what I'm saying. But I don't think he has. I've never heard anybody say Aaron Rodgers, Super Bowl winner, 3-time MVP winner, maybe 4-time MVP winner at this point, and Walter Payton Man of the Year winner. Never heard that happen. Never heard that last one. And so, like Socrates says, he consorts with wantonness, and is not afraid or ashamed of pursuing pleasure in violation of nature. But he whose initiation is recent, and who has been the spectator of many glories in the other world, is amazed when he sees anyone having a godlike face or form, which is the expression of divine beauty. It's so funny. So let me just back up and reread that again and give you an example. He who is not newly initiated, or who has become corrupted, does not easily rise out of this world to the sight of true beauty in the other. That means to truly be able to understand what makes any random anything beautiful. Without initiation, without religion, you can't appreciate beauty. You won't become awed at the sight of a beautiful woman, or a beautiful intellect, or a beautiful mountain, or a beautiful rabbit, or a beautiful anything. And I insist that the word beautiful just means man. Manlinessful. Beauty just means manness. Bonus. Manness. It just means manness. And so beauty just means humanity. You just see humanity everywhere. And if you don't see humanity everywhere, if you don't see humanity in other humans, you are not the human, not them. You are the one who's not human. And so instead of being awed at the sight of beauty in everything, the person who's not initiated and just doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about anything, they're given over to pleasure. They're going to do things like go on vacations and go touring and think that what they're doing is admiring beauty. But what they're going to come out with it is saying things like, oh, well, people who know how to admire these things don't know anything about them. I, with my intuition and my feeling like I must not know what's going on here, must mean that even Egyptologists don't know what's going on in Egypt. Because you went there and you found pleasure in it. And I guess you would find it less pleasurable to know that Egyptologists know more about it than you do. So you just focus, you fixate on what you find unpleasurable because you were there to seek pleasure. And like a brutish beast, Aaron Rodgers rushes on to enjoy and beget. What is he doing right now as he holds the Steelers hostage? He's talking about a potential wedding, and he's talking about some probably fictional cancer. What does he do? He rushes over like a brutish bear to enjoy being rich and famous on Joe Rogan in the summer when he wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. And to beget. Isn't he trying to get married? He's not initiated. Doesn't know anything. The books that he suggests to Pat McAfee, I would have thought were childish when I was 13. I would have thought that his literacy was middle school. Now, this is stuff you should be interested in before you're a teenager. Before you've even begun to develop intellectually, you should be interested in The Alchemist, I think is what it's called, by, what's his name, Pablo? Whatever. Like Ayn Rand. You should be interested in Ayn Rand when you're about 4th, 5th grade. 9, 10. That's when its themes are intellectually appropriate for a human being. Like that adults were taken with her in her time. She was 9, 10 years old intellectually. Was a benefit of feminism. It was because she was a woman that people have ever taken her seriously. And is that the legacy that 20th century, 21st century feminism really wants to leave? That the only reason we took this dumb bitch seriously is because she was a woman? Is that what you want? That can't be. That can't be what all of the ground level fighting was about. blotting out African American women who helped foundational mathematics and computing, and remembering dumb bitches who advocated for the murder of children. That can't be what all that fighting was about. I just refuse to accept that, even though it's true. I refuse to believe that, like, my ex-wife wants to murder babies. Like, she wakes up in the morning and she goes, I want to murder babies because that's what it requires of me as a feminist, and I want to be known as a feminist. But there are Jews and Muslims who wake up in this world and go, I can't wait to kill a Jew or a Muslim today. So I know I'm wrong. But I don't like believing it. Aaron Rodgers consorts with wantonness, says Socrates, and is not afraid or ashamed of pursuing pleasure in violation of nature. In violation of nature. I mean, you get on that airplane, it's in violation of nature. You travel from California to Egypt and pay a poor person to pretend to read for you inscriptions on a wall. That's in violation of the natural way that things are supposed to go. There are institutions in place to educate you on what those walls say and to allow you, a rich person, to invest in the institutions that will tell you what they actually say safely. But the uninitiated soul is wanton. He whose initiation is recent, and who has been the spectator of many glories in the other world, is amazed when he sees anyone having a godlike face or form, which is the expression of divine beauty. When I was about 12, 13, people used to accuse me of being gay because I was willing to acknowledge that men can be attractive in their own right. It's like there's a Neebs gaming moment where Neebs tells Apsro, you look pretty good for a man your age. And Apsro goes, we having a moment right now?